welcome to the top of the world, welcome to the channel, welcome to the interior of what's behind the yellow door on my tractor. And the problem I've got is for the last 10 years this has had just a small amount of brake, and you can always hear an air leak in there, and I'm not the first man to have owned this machine, to gone in there and take out the diesel tank and dig deep to find the leak and can't find it. So it's bound to be a split pipe from one of the winters many years ago. Anyway, what's happened now is the air compressor that fills the air tanks has stopped working. So now I have nothing at all. And I can't imagine why that stopped working, because I know nothing about it. But it does look like it's in a mess. So this is the air compressor. Runs off belts, and it just looks oily in a mess. And I don't know anything about that. It does look like it's got an oil drain on it or something there. I have no idea how this works. So I've took this side off, but I don't know if you can see it equally as well, or a different perspective from this side. Not really. Anyway, that's what we've got, and that is no longer sending air to the air tanks. And I'm assuming it's just a simple piston in there. And this has two large air tanks, cylinder air tanks underneath, just like a truck. See the mess? It doesn't look good. And it's not making the belt squeal, so it's not seized. But it's not pumping air anymore. In fact, considering I only cleaned and serviced this last year, it just looks in a bit of a oily mess. So I don't know. Well, that's quite clearly not really on there. That sucks. That's where it sucks air from the air filter. There. And then we've got all these little things on top which I don't know anything about. It's clearly got a head. They're the head bolts. There's a cylinder in there. That's where it sucks the air from. It compresses the air and puts it out here in this rubber line. Puts it out through this rubber line here, I'm guessing. And then that goes into whatever that is, which also looks in a mess. It all looks wet and in a mess. So I don't know what. And then it goes into a hard line there and into one of two tanks, or it splits. And there's two of the tanks there. I don't know how easy that is to see. Right. Okay. So it all has this same wet looking mess on it. So I don't know about this, is the answer. Anyway, I suppose really we need to know whether it's broken, don't we? So maybe if I undo that, I can see or touch the piston in the top. Sucks air in from there, compresses it there, sends it out through this hose here into whatever that is, and then splits here and here, and I'm assuming that's an adjusting valve to adjust the split, and then it equally distributes into those tanks, and from there it operates the brakes. But it's all got that kind of same wet look, and I don't know. This uses, despite its age, It just uses no oil. Oh. Okay, well. Oh, that's because I've just started it. Ooh. I was about to say that don't look good. It obviously did all the winter snow ploughing, but I can't imagine it's done too many hours. Oil's bang on, that might be black, but it's exactly on the line, so it's not using any oil from the engine. So then I wonder if this has its own oil, but why wouldn't it be pumping air? I don't know. Hi buddy, are you waiting for me to play ball? Let's start her up. It's not sucking air. Doesn't appear to be attached to anything. That fan you can hear running. A lot of you say, well, there's my cab heater. And that fan you can hear is, does that work? No. It's like having a candle in the windstorm in the winter. Right. Well, I guess I just take it apart, right? There's a little plaque there. It's a Bosch. Okay. But it looks wet, see? It just looks wet. So, I'm guessing just take a few things off and see what I can see. We really need to know whether that piston's going up and down, and whether it's compressing air. That's what we really need to know. And why all this is wet. And there's like a plug or something here. I'm assuming that comes off. Yeah, none of that looks good in there. And then there's this spring. That spring there is supposed to be fixed onto that. I don't know what that does. But whatever it is, that spring has snapped. So, we should probably have a go at repairing that too. I've started by taking this off because I'm going to assume this is some kind of drain, albeit assumption being not very good. We don't know what's behind it. Oil. Okay, there's a lot of oil in there. Thick, nasty oil. So maybe we need to change the oil in there. Okay. Right, that definitely didn't have much oil in there. So I've put those two back in because they have nothing to do with the oil. As I've discovered on the other side, that's fed with oil from the engine. So there's an oil feed pipe here, and that, if you follow it down, goes in there behind the filter and it comes out of the engine. So, and there's a return. So oil feed is done via the engine, oil in, and the other hose is oil out. So that's not it. Well, that's full of oil. Why is that full of oil? So it doesn't use any oil. Okay, that's disconnected. Now I'm going to start it up and see if we've got any air coming out of there, because it doesn't appear we've got any air going in either. But the con rod, I can see the bottom of the piston. That looks good. I haven't taken the head off yet. Bit reluctant because I've got no gasket. But let's start. See, there's oil dripping out of that. That tells me probably the rings have gone in the air compressor, right? I don't know if you can see that. I can't see that. Right, so this is the oil feed line, and it has oil running out of it. That don't look like that's good oil, considering I just hasn't done enough hours to warrant that colour of. Anyway, I'm going to start it, and then you'll see what I don't see. Pumping air. Not very strong. Okay, there's a couple of things I've learnt from that. Firstly, that's pumping. Secondly, I can now see oil running out of that plug I just took out. So I need to take that plug back out and find out why that's not sealing properly. But that's pumping, but it's got oil in it. So you would think that if the pistons are no good in the piston, it's leaking oil up through, past, and putting it in the airlines, then why isn't it using any oil, and where's it going? Well, that'll be in the tanks then, surely. If that's pushing oil through here, then the tanks could be full of oil. What you didn't see, because the battery overheated on the phone and the phone shut down, was what come out of the air tanks. Right, not bad considering. There's a small valve on the back of that. This, which is usually covered up. When I was pressing that and it was running, you could hear the compressor pumping. Right, there's nothing there now. And there must have been some air pressure in the tanks to push that out. So, if I come around there and put my hand on this brake, we can hear air. What about the other one? I think we can hear air to that as well. Yeah. And it's trying to move. And then it's out of air. So, it's not It's not pushing enough air, it's not making enough air, it's not holding enough air. There appears to be some sort of drain or something on the bottom of that. I want to have a go at taking that off. Because we're good to air, we can feel it pumping. Although, if you put your thumb over it really hard, it stops pushing air. Which tells me the air compressor's probably a little weak. But, what it's not doing is filling these tanks up and then, you know, the pressure air release is firing off when they're full. So it's like it's not pushing enough air to be able to operate the brakes. So I'm going to now investigate this unit here to find out what's going on there. Shouldn't be any question of this. This is just a distribution valve. Yeah, I'm not sure. Right, I have a common sense theory. When I put my thumb over the end of that hose when the compressor was running, I could easily stop the airflow. Now, given everything that's got to go through and then it's got to pump to pressure, what happens if the air compressor, the compressed air, is at low pressure? Why is all this covered with oil? So, if that's a head, which it is right there, 4 bolts, right, like a small engine, but it's pressurising air. If the gasket has failed or blown, that would explain why it's so wet below the head. That would also explain why I can put my thumb over the air feed hose, which is only rubber, so we're not talking about great pressure here. It would explain why, and I can actually see, as I'm sure you can if you knew what you were looking at, a gasket there. Can I get into a position where I can see if it's... See, that don't look good, does it? What's that there? I wonder if that gasket's failed. And that's why it's not now no longer able to pump to pressure, or I can easily put my thumb over the feed line. You can quite clearly see the gasket there. There's less oil on this side because we've got the fan right here. So this big mess here could be a tiny little hole, and it's fluffing out oil and air and not getting to pressure. Now, I have no idea how... Oh, that's the exhaust manifold. Well, that's another burn, Simon. Nice. Yeah, you know, before I start taking all that over there off, I'm back to this. And the amount of wetness, all this wetness here, right, it's not below there, look. It's in line with the fan. So, and you can also see it over the front of the engine. I believe now that's all coming from there. And that head gasket's failed. That's what I believe. Yeah, that's my common sense theory, that I'm back to this and I'm back to that head. Now, if I take that off, of course, I don't have a gasket to replace it, then I'm done for. Can I make a gasket for that? Can I even get a gasket for that? Do you know what? I'm going to go and have a look, because this is obviously a very obsolete vehicle and parts are, but it's Bosch. So, let me go and let me have my fingers do the walking on the keyboard and see if I can get a gasket for that first. Because at the moment she still runs and I can still use it. But I don't know what the consequences are of taking that off and then running it. Right, assuming the top is just oil feed. There is also a big nut on the top there. Not quite sure what that does. You see there's no oil above this point here. It's just from there down. And it's being blown about by the fan. And you can see that from the build up on the front. And at halfway, this is all really wet and halfway it dries out, so it's been blown back onto this by the fan. So if there's a small leak up here in this gasket, it's blowing out this way, and the fan's blowing it back on everything, which would explain why the top of that is wet. And maybe this too. Okay, we're back to my original Volvo parts manual, and because it's so old and everything was built so great then, every single nut, bolt, washer, spring, gasket is numbered and listed. So this is the air compressor. So we've seen the bottom of the cylinder there when we took this out here, and we looked in and we could see the bottom of the conrod. This is what you could see. So it actually works on a crank, and that piston goes up and down and compresses air, I'm assuming through this series of valves here, which screw into that. So we've seen that big nut there on top of this. This comes in from the air filter, and this is this rubber pipe that comes out and loops round and goes into a set of valves. This is the bolt that we took off to let the oil out. And this is a small bolt we removed to peer into there. Well, we didn't need to do any of that. So this here, I believe, is the valve that allows air in or out. So I can't see underneath this head, but I should imagine there's an air in and then an air out. That's what I'm suspecting. This is the gasket that I think may be at fault. Could it be this here that goes into there? Well, there's a funny connection up there. We could take that off and have a look at that. Anyway, my point about this is all of this is obsolete. All of it. I can't get any of it. Or not that I can find anyway. So I don't believe this gasket at the bottom of the cylinder is at fault, because all the oil is from there down. But we do have this connection going into this side of the head, which has got these funny bolts on, which we'll go back out and have a look. And I do know if we undo that big nut there, this here looks like it's a valve. So as the piston goes down, it will draw air down, and then it needs to push it back up. Well, if it just pushes it back up, it's going to go back into the air filter from whence it came. So somehow the air is drawn in from here and down, compressed, pushed up and out of there. And I'm going to guess this is part of that and how it allows it. There's a second kind of valve there that goes in this side. So there's two valves. That says that goes in from underneath. Okay, so this valve lets the air in and prevents it from leaving. This valve lets the air out. So we've got two valves. We've got this one here and this one here. One is here and one is here. Air in, suck down, compressed, air out. Valve closes, right? Piston goes down, draws air in from here. Piston goes up, lets air out. So this valve here, the one on this side of the head, which is this here, that has to open and close. And then this valve, which goes in here, that has to open and close to allow air in. As the piston goes down, this valve here closes, the air up is forced out of here. This valve closes because at that point the piston's going down again and drawing in from here. So, could it be one of these valves? It could be. It could be this valve is not shutting properly and therefore allowing air back out. It could be this valve is not shutting properly and allowing air back in, so that you're not actually getting the compression here that you need. So you've got two sets of valves. Both of those could be slightly leaking. The diaphragm could be split. It could be this gasket here that's allowing air pressure out, and it would blow the oil out, or it could be this connection here. Anyway, we're a lot wiser now on the workings of this small compressor than we were. So we know it's oil fed from the engine. Feed in, feed out. That's on the other side that you can't see. This is the plaque that we scraped the dirt off. This is the crank assembly, crank that is fixed to the drive shaft. This is the conrod and the piston. Could be piston rings because we're getting some oil from in here pushing up the cylinder past the rings. Is that also allowing air down in there, which is pressurizing, or would pressurize, the oil in the engine? So could we be losing air pressure out from the rings? Because the rings do two things in this particular instance. In all instances, they firstly stop the oil passing up, but they stop the air passing down. Right, and that's applicable in all circumstances where you have pistons and rings. So if you have a heavily breathing engine, sometimes that can be through the head gasket and water pressure. It can also be through the rings and cylinder head pressure. Do we have excessive pressure in the engine? Yeah, I saw that this morning when we were running it up. I saw oil blowing out through the breather. That's head gasket. It could also be this. So in an ideal world, really, we need to take off all of this and inspect these valves, albeit we can't get the parts. So if we now translate what I've said back to outside, right, we'll have a much better understanding of how this is working. So now we've come to the real thing again. This here is the cylinder head. This, as you can see, is going out. This is the valve top. In here is a valve that opens and closes that allows the pressure from the cylinder to be pumped this way. And in here is the second valve that opens and closes that allows air to be drawn in but stops it from leaving. So air comes in here, it gets sucked down into the cylinder comes up, compresses it, and it leaves this way. Underneath there is the valve. Not quite sure what that is, but so we've got oil very clearly escaping. Is it anything to do with any of these? Well, this is an easy check. We could check that. But I'm still going back to the gasket. So, because you've got the fan running when the engine is running and the noise and the wobbling, it's going to be quite hard for me to see if there's a leak. Unless I can put smoke in here. If I can draw smoke in there, so that the smoke comes down here, colour the air if you like, and see if I can see anything escaping. Wouldn't that be an easy way? So in order to do that, I would need something that generates smoke so that I could suck it down to see if it was being blown out of anywhere. That would be a way of doing it. Yeah. Do I have anything that makes smoke? Not really, but that would be a way of doing that. Could it be any of this up here? Yeah, it could be. You know, not everything can be as obsolete as I'm finding, because I know a number of people, and a number of people have reported to me that they've renovated these, like completely renovated these. So some of these parts that are coming up as obsolete can only be obsolete through the dealers that I know and that I'm looking at. There must be, like that Bosch air compressor, that must be available somewhere Yeah, okay. Well, I don't have that information to hand. So, I'm not sure if anybody else has had any experience with one of those. But I do know the clock is ticking. So, I kind of want to take that big nut out the top and extract this. I really, really want to take the head off. But if I damage that gasket, has that ever been off? It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. There is this funny thing going on this side of it. And what happens if... I mean, I'm guessing if the head gasket is... Oh, let's do it. Let's just go and do it and take it off. Oh, I know you can't see very well what I'm about to attempt to do. But what I've decided to do, since the valves that we've seen on the line drawing from the 1960s, which I'm very grateful to have had, are all in the head. And I'm quite sure that the issue is in the head by applying what I can see to common sense. I know many of you have commented in the past, you know, it's a common sense approach. Why do I keep applying common sense? Because I've had more successes, by far, than failures with common sense. So the biggest risk behind taking all this is I damage that gasket, and I can't get another one, but I can make one, or at least attempt to make one, which is better than no attempt at all, because at the moment I've got my Snowplow with no brakes at all. The brakes have always been bad, not very good, but what I know is below -20 something freezes and the brakes are excellent, and we've always had enough brakes to stop it. Occasionally I have to dump the bucket or the plough or the forks or whatever's on there to slow it up, but at the moment there's nothing. So I've got nothing to lose by taking this apart. Have I thought about changing the brakes over to hydraulic? Yeah, but it's manual pressure. You know, hydraulic's so much better than air in the Arctic here. You know, I think it's a step too far. Am I nursing this along? Yeah, I've been nursing this along, and the man before me nursed it along for 30 years. So, you know, there we go. And I know you're kind of in the dark. You're just watching me put this wrench in here. Okay, well. They're not tight. They are not tight at all. That's a little worrying about how not tight they were. No. So the bolts on this head, I don't know what the torque specifications are supposed to be, but they weren't tight. None of them. There's nothing holding that head on now except itself. I didn't have a washer on it. Oh, and it's off. Okay. There you go. There's the valves. Right, this is obviously heavily oiled, and you can see the gasket's also heavily oiled there. So the gasket's come off with the head. Just doesn't look good. It looks like the head wasn't tight enough, and air and oil's been coming out through the gasket. Look, you can see. Right, that hasn't just happened when I pulled that off. And then if we look on top of the head, we can see where the problems are and what the problem was, and I was absolutely bang on. Spot on right. So that's excellent common sense, or justification for the use of common sense to take the head off. Because I deduced from all the muck and the oil around there that the head gasket had failed. I don't think it had. I think it wasn't tight enough. So I'm going to show you now what I can see, and you can see clearly where the oil and the air has been going, and why we've had no real pressure going into the air tanks, and therefore total brake failure. There. So the gasket has basically been leaking all the way around here and here, where the biggest build-ups of oil are. This is the piston in there, heavily oiled. The piston's at the top. I can't feel any scoring at all Anyway, we can see what the failure is. The failure is the gasket. Right, and this has been blowing out of here quite clearly, and it wasn't tight. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this head, complete with its gasket, inside, and we're going to clean this up. Right, and we should be able to check these valves by blowing and sucking through here, but we're going to have to do a lot of cleaning before I put my lips around that. Okay, so this is our inlet valve. This opens and closes and draws the air in and closes when the piston goes down, and then this opens when the piston comes up and closes. So these are our two valves. This screw comes through here and is connected to that small bolt there, and then the big bolt, and this whole valve comes out. So let's go and clean this up. The gasket looks like a copper gasket. I'm not quite sure, but that was due to lack of pressure from the head bolts. I'll tell you what that was, because they were loose when they came out. Okay, let's go and clean it up. Alright, do we want to look at the mess in here? No, probably best not want to look at the mess in here, because I'm in the middle of a million things as usual. What we want to look at is my parts cleaner, which is not the easiest thing to get to, but I have used it recently when we were doing the other tractor, so we should be all good to go. Should I be concerned about any of the chemicals in my parts cleaner and those valves? Well, those valves have got diaphragms and rubbers in them, so I should be a little concerned about what's in them. I'm going to pour all this goo over here. Now there's no lights shining into this parts cleaner, and I don't have a head torch, and I've already started. So for the moment, all you're going to see is me, and I don't have power going to my parts cleaner. I do have a wire brush soaked in some various chemicals. Full of oil. Everything is full of oil. Right, that goes first, then that. And then this. Okay, well none of that seems to be sitting properly, and there's a broken thing there. Right, that's like something's broken there. That is just a single chamber, right? Yeah. So we got some broken things. So there's a top nut, there's the spring, and then all of this should go together. Right, well that don't look right. This don't look right. And none of this looks right. That's a washer that's not doing anything. And none of this looks right. So, and that's broken at the bottom. So this isn't doing anything. It's not opening or closing. Nothing seems to be in the right place. We've got a picture of that. Well, we should have a picture of that here. So that's the nut with the washer on it. Yes, check. So there should be a thread, right? This is the thread that looks like that. And then there should be something flat. All of this looks broken. Hang on a minute. Isn't that spring broken off of there? Yes. That spring is... Somebody's had this apart and they didn't know how it went back together. Because I just found this part of the spring at the top. Well, there's no way it can pass through that. So this spring is broken. That spring is broken there. So that's the first thing, that's the lower spring. Or is that the lower spring? I actually think that's the lower, no. Because look at the size of it. So what I've got to do is ensure that returns and seals whether I use all these fancy bits or not. And the reason I say that is because the most important thing is to have that in there with a spring on it. That's it. That's what I've got to achieve. And I've got a broken spring there and a small spring there. I don't know if it was part of it. And the reason being is you can see all these bits here. I'm just not seeing how that works with that spring. Not only is that spring so tight, it was also in two parts. The bottom half here, that was in there like that. But the top part that was broken, right, when I found it, it was like that when I opened it up. Well, clearly that's not right. Right, so maybe that isn't even the right spring. Because it's clearly broken and it's not been put back right. So we've got to assume somebody less intelligent than me has been in here before. So let's now make the assumption I'm the most intelligent, and let's see if I can make this valve work only using some of the pieces that I've got. Okay, so if we look at how this has got to work, I've got a bolt that holds it all together, and the top of the shaft fits into that. Right. And what I've got to do is make this work with all the washers and bits I've got, but without that. And that, I'm sure that's not the right spring. But what I do have is a large amount of springs. Right, these are all old trampoline springs. We don't need any of those. We can roll those out. We can roll those out. We can roll that out because it's we want a compression spring, not a tension spring. Tension spring, compression spring. Right, compression spring works on compression and a tension spring works on tension. So what we need are compression springs, not tension springs. So we can roll all of those straight out of the equation. And then we tip this one out. And this has a lot more selection of compression springs and tension springs. So we'll eliminate all the tension springs and anything that's too big to be any good to us. So what we're looking for is something like this. This one's kind of screaming at me. Use me, it's screaming. We need a shorter one like that. That would sit on there like that potentially, and then that would sit on there. Oh, I'm liking what I'm seeing already. I'm liking what I'm seeing. So do we need this? Do we need that? That stops the operation of that spring. However you look at it, that stops the operation. What happens if that went that way round? What? Hold on a minute. Oh no, that's not what it shows in the picture. Definitely shows that. It definitely then shows a spring. Right, that's a new spring. It definitely shows that going on that way. Right. If we use either of those, they actually stop the operation of that valve opening, if I'm honest. So let's do away with all those parts, because I don't think we need them. Then it shows another washer going on top, like that. But that's the shaped washer, almost like it's supposed to have a spring sat over it. But none of those springs are right. So where did that go? Does that actually go there? And then it shows this little, there's a tiny little circlip here. It's like a C-clip. It actually shows that going on over the top for some reason. But it doesn't wouldn't keep that washer. Is that even the right washer? Right, let's assume there's been an idiot in here. Right, that's what we're going to assume. That there's been an idiot in here. That's worn. And these are all the wrong washers made up by an idiot. Let's make that assumption. Because this little circlip here, tiny little thing, would go straight through that hole. So that makes no sense to me at all. Then we put that on top. Then we put this tight fitting washer on there, and then this small C-clip, which is so small I don't even know if you can see it. We're gonna push that down on top of that washer. Right, like so. So this is what we now have. And then what it shows is this spring going on top of there. That's what it shows. And then it shows this going on there. Okay, the spring at the top doesn't appear to be doing much. Like it's not quite long enough. So does that mean that if we put a bigger spring, do we have one much bigger than that? Or let's try that. Okay. So that spring moves in there, that moves in there. So what happens if we reassemble this? Can we make that valve work? So this assembly would go in there like that. And then this spring would go on top like that. And then all this would fit together like this. We've got all these bits, right, that were inside there, but are no longer inside there. So what happens if we put that together? Right, well, not only does that taste horrible, we can no longer blow air back through there. And the spring's really strong in there. So, have I overdone it on the spring? No, I don't think so. But we can't blow back through there, which is ultimately what I was trying to achieve. And we've changed all the bits inside this valve, except the very basics. So, let's see if I can make this work with compressed air now. Okay, so we know this valve works because I can blow air in and I can't suck it back out. With this valve, I can't blow back down it, but I can't put my lips round that to blow. So you're going to have to trust me here. I'm going to put compressed air in one of these holes, and the valve, you steer it prop open and should blow. And I can't blow me air because I ain't got none. But trust me, if I do that, that valve opens, you can hear it and it blows. And I can't blow back down it. So, I think that is going to work better than what we had, because what we had didn't work at all, right? Now what I've got to do is assess this gasket. Okay, I know it's not leaking from the gasket because we've cleaned it up and I put a very thin layer of gasket sealant around it and screwed it back down. I didn't film putting it all back together, firstly because you saw me take it apart, and secondly the battery overheated and died. Okay, well, I've been inside so I haven't heard the air tanks work. 2 brakes, left and right. There's the right one. It's not working. You can hear air. I'll explain that in a minute. This pedal down. Okay. That one is moving. So looks like the diaphragm has blown out in this one because I saw remnants of it. Inside that big round thing, this big round thing, it's like a rubber hat. It's a diaphragm, and that one's gone. Have we got any brakes? I don't know, because I haven't driven it, because I didn't want to do that till you were here. So I don't know. We'll find out. No brakes. 7 hours. Common sense approach. Common sense should have said just stay in bed. Laze about all day. Go and cut some grass, cut some trees, chop some firewood. Do anything but mess around with that. Anyway, there are no brakes at all whatsoever. When I put it back together, the air compressor is definitely pumping stronger and harder air than it did. Obviously because the valve was broken. So we fixed the valve. I think we fixed a leak on the head. But 2 things that weren't stopping this from breaking, because it's not breaking, and it's still not breaking. Diaphragm's gone on this side, so this wheel's not going to break anyway, potentially, I don't know. The other side, it looks to be working, but it's not working at all. We've got no brakes. Nor have I had the tanks fill up, and anyway. So, absolutely complete failure, not a success whatsoever. Normally I would just delete this, but because this is my only film this week, because I've been doing stuff that I've not been filming, you're going to see a failure. There are no brakes on my snowplow. It must have brakes. I have no clue now. Well, that's not true. We're going up to the valves here. Why are the tanks not filling up? I don't know. I don't know. All I do know is I've had enough. Thank you all for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.